There's hundreds of knots out there. You can learn as many as you need to. These are the ones our program uses for testing, and they're going to be some of the most common you'll see out there. So we're going to start with our rope. This will be referred to as the working end, is the end that you're tying the knots with, and then the standing end is everything else. So if you've got a 100-foot section of rope, here's your working end, and then the rest of the 99 feet are the standing end. So the first knot, some of you climbers may already be familiar with it, it's going to be a figure 8 follow through. This is a very common one to tie into a climbing harness. You want to measure your amount of rope, and this can vary a little bit depending on some things, but this is a good way to generally get a good measurement. So you start with the standing end in your fingers, and then you measure out until you've got one pinched part of rope at your shoulder, and then the other part all the way out here. So then you want to keep an eye on this pinched part, take the working end, wrap it around, and then stab it back through. So it's going to look something like this. Now you want to keep that pinched part, and now you've got this 8 loop in your rope. So now we continue to the rest of the figure 8 follow through. So we've got our figure 8. Now we just need to follow it through. If you were connecting to a harness, you would then take this up through both the top and bottom piece of your harness, and you're going to follow itself through. So the key here is keeping the ropes parallel with each other. Going to come up and around, following itself through. All right, here we go. We have our knot, but it's not dressed. See how this bit up here isn't quite parallel? It's overlapping each other. Really seeing when a knot is dressed or not comes with time and just recognition by seeing it hundreds and hundreds of times. Once you get good at tying these knots, you can tie them pretty much dressed almost every time, but for this time, we need to dress it. So there's several methods you can do this. I just like to do it visually, where I know what a dressed knot looks like, and I fiddle with it until it looks that way. So what I'm going to need to do for this is switch the top and the bottom here, which moves our overlap, and then I'm going to switch these two, which moves that overlap. And now, pull it tight, it's dressed. We want a low gain loop that you can't fit your fist through, so nothing gets tangled on it. And then down here, we want this to be in between the width of your palm and the length of your palm. Next knot is going to be a figure 8 on a bend. Now, a bend is when you're joining 2 ropes together. So you're going to start it out similar to your figure 8 follow through, except you don't need quite as long of a tail. So I'm going to start out by making my figure 8. And this time, I'm going to be adding a second rope. So now we'll grab our second rope. Similar diameters work best. I'm going to take the black rope and follow it through as if I were tying a figure 8 follow through. So there, after I've followed it through, is our figure 8 on a bend, created by joining 2 ropes together. And you're going to want to dress this the same way as the other. Now, our next knot is a figure 8 on a bight. And a bight is like taking a loop of rope, such as this. So you'll take this can be anywhere within the rope. It doesn't have to be near the end. And you're going to pre-measure it about this much. I'd say go for a foot. And then I put my 3 fingers, my left hand, on here, and then use my right hand, bring it around. And so you've got a twist in it, and then stab it through the top. Similar to doing a figure 8 with 1 rope, except you're doing it with 2. Several of the knots we're going to be tying have several different ways of tying them. I'm going to be only teaching one way today for most of the knots, If you learn it a better way, different things work for different people better. You can just go on YouTube and there's plenty of different versions on different ways to tie these knots. So the next one I'm going to be tying is called the butterfly knot, or sometimes the alpine butterfly. This one I am going to show two different ways because it's very commonly taught two different ways. So I'm going to start with, some people call it the snowman method. You take a bight in the middle of the rope and you twist, and then twist a second time while keeping track of the middle section you twist. So if this were a snowman, he's got two loops and you want to keep track of the middle section. So now you're going to take the head part of the snowman, fold it forward, under, and then through that middle part. It looks kind of gross. Usually it should start to look a little prettier, more like a butterfly is supposed to when you pull on either side of your rope. The advantage of this one is that it is bidirectional. It can be pulled either direction, and it is useful for being put in the middle of a rope. The second way to tie a butterfly is called the hand wrap method. And so you'll start with one part of the rope. This will be your working end and this will be your standing end. You'll start with the working end coming over towards the front of your palm. Then you'll wrap it a second time. Then you'll wrap it a third time. Then with the third one, you'll cross it over like that, because you're only going to want to worry about this middle piece now. You're going to pull the middle piece, tuck it under the other two, and then same as the last one, to dress it, you just pull in either direction, and look, you have a butterfly. Now, knots are knots because when you pull them, they get tighter, but hitches are a classification of rope work or knots that can only be used around an object. If you remove the object, it comes undone. That's the difference between a knot and a hitch in a nutshell. So we're going to start on our hitches now. This is called a Munter hitch. To start this one, I'm going to have the working end in my right hand and the standing end in my left hand. If I'm doing it in the middle of a rope, then I can just pick it anywhere. I just need to designate one end as the working end, one end is the standing end. So I take the working end, make a loop with it. So then you're going to do the same thing. Now you're going to fold them like a piece of paper and then keep an eye on this point. Then you can either put it around an object, or most likely you're going to put a carabiner through it. Dress it by just pulling tight on either end. Another useful hitch is the clove hitch. So we're going to do the same thing where I've got my working end in my right hand, my standing end in my left hand. I go right over left, or working end over standing end. Same thing over here. So far this is exactly the same as the Munter hitch. Now instead of folding them to make a Munter hitch, I'm going to put the right one, the second one that I made, underneath the left one. And so here, get your carabiner out again, is the object that we have tied our hitch around. Next we have a square knot, and you might not know it, but you use this one every day when you tie your shoes. So I'm going to be using the black rope and the tan rope for clarity. You can do this with either hand, you just need to remember which one is which. So you take your right hand, put it over the left side, and then bring it up. And now you do the opposite. So then the left side goes over the right, under, and up. Pull it tight, and then here is your square knot. If you get confused and do right over right, and then follow it up with another right over right, you have tied a granny knot, not a square knot. And this one can come undone. It does not cinch nearly as well as the square knot. Next we have a barrel knot. This one can be used as a stopper knot a lot of times. Once again, our climbers are going to be familiar with this one to close the end of a rope so that your device can't slip through it. So you're going to take your working end and your standing end and then put it around standing end while keeping track of this loop in your hand, around the standing end again, and then you're going to stab through both loops with your working end. Pull it tight. Here is your barrel knot. So the barrel knot we just tied can be useful in making a Prusik. We do that by taking a length of rope, and then we're going to close the loop securely using 2 barrel knots, or some people call it a double fisherman's. So we're going to take the working end, just pick one of the ends, put it over standing end, then you're going to start out with an X, like you did on the barrel knot, and there's your 2 loops, and then the end comes through itself, through the 2 loops. You're going to have something that looks like, I'm going to flip it around and work on the other side. That's just what works best for my brain. So I'm going to do the exact same thing that I just did. So I'm going to start with both parts of the rope over my thumb to have something to wrap it around. And I'm going to start with an X in the rope, and then a second loop, and then it'll come through the center of itself. Pull tight to dress this one, and now you pull the 2 ends together, pull tight again, and you have your Prusik. You can see the 2 X's line up against each other, make a nice tight seal, and then we want our ends on this to be around 3 fingers in length for both of them. So here's your Prusik. Brie moment.
Oh, it's kind of, did that break off? What? That's crazy.
Another type of hitch is the scaffold hitch. This one is also very similar to the barrel knot. You're going to take your working end, standing end, you get a loop of the rope. I like to use my thumb and forefinger to work with it here, so I'm going to pinch it, bring it around my thumb and the other rope once, forming an X, twice, and then 3 times for a scaffold hitch, as opposed to 2 with a barrel knot. And then the working end comes back through all of your loops and then cinches. And here you have scaffold hitch. Next we have one of my favorite and potentially one of the most common knots you'll see in climbing, tree work, and rope rescue. That's going to be the bowline. For a standard bowline, you take your working end and your standing end, make a loop, working end over standing end, as you can see. And then if you're tying this around an object, this is where you go around the object, then back up through your loop you made, underneath your standing end, and then back through in the middle. This is a pretty standard bowline, but this is not the one that we use for most of our rope rescue systems. Bowline like this, under a great amount of weight, the tail could potentially slip through and undo the knot. There are several ways to close the system and make sure that that doesn't happen. The way that we're more often going to see a bowline tied is called a triple bight bowline, a 3 bight bowline, or sometimes a full strength bowline. And the advantage to this is your end doesn't slip through like the one I just showed. So you're going to start out how you did before, with just one rope, except we've got it doubled over. So here's your working end, and here's your standing end. Now you're going to take your working end hand over the standing end, and then instead of following up through and around, you're going to take fingers through here, through your loop, and grab the standing end, and then pull through. Now you've created a type of a slip knot. With this one, about as much here as you do here. and that's going to be so our 3 loops are the same size. Here's where you stab it through and then fold it over itself, and now you grab here, and here's where the snap, part of the snap bowline comes in. So snap, and here you have a bowline similar to before, with one difference. You've done it with doubled over rope, so instead of a single end here, you've got your 2 loops plus your loop here, which are about the same size. If you need to make this one a little bit bigger, you can just feed through to make that happen. But now we've got all 3 ropes, and we're going to, if we're going to attach something, clip through all 3 of them. This way, your tail cannot slip through. So that's the triple bight bowline or 3 bight bowline. Our 2 final knots are variations on a bowline. Whereas we just did a 3 bight bowline by using a doubled over rope, here we are using 2 separate ropes and joining them together. This is often tied in the long tail form, where you'll want 2 full arm lengths of tail, 2 to 3 depending on the size of the rope. But for the demonstration purposes, I'm just going to show it with shorter tails. Same thing as before, you start with your working end and your standing end. Working end over standing end to create your loop. Here it is reversed. And now, once again, you reach through, grab your standing end, pull it up, back through, and now you've got your slip knot. Now you're going to take the working end, feed it through, back over itself, and here's where the snap part comes in. This is the best part of a bowline, it's the snap. And now you have your intertwined bowline, similar to last time, except it's done with 2 ropes. This one can be hard to dress sometimes. Similar to the figure 8, you're just going to want to flip the ropes next to each other until they all line up symmetrically. Once again, most of the time we do not leave these tails short, but we have about 6 to 8 feet on the end of this. If you were to use it like this with the short tails that I used for the demonstration, there is a potential that they could slip through when it becomes loaded. Now we're going to do an interlocked bowline. We're going to start it the same way we did a single line bowline, the very simple one that I demoed at the beginning, where you've just got your working end, standing end, single line, working end over standing end, reach through, created your slip knot. Now you take your working end, pass it through, fold it back over itself, and snap. So here's your bowline. And then we're going to take a second rope and do the exact same thing. So get rid of that for a minute. You're going to need it again in just the next step. So take your working end, standing end, fold it, reach through, create the slip knot, and then here is where you attach it to the other loop. So you take this, feed it through the other loop, and now you feed it through your slip knot, double it back on itself, and snap. And here you have 2 separate bowlines with 2 separate ropes interlocking to each other. This one is also usually tied in the long tail configuration, so we would have once again wanted to leave these tails 6 to 8 feet by doing 2 to 3 arm lengths before we started the knot. Now we have our max over 1 Prusik hitch. So that's going to be tied around, it's easiest to tie it around a weighted line, and you're tying the wraps this way away from your anchor so that it grabs. So you'll just wrap the rope maximum, or as many times as you possibly can. I think I'm probably going to get about 6. Maybe, there we go, 5 or so. And so then I bring this piece over, making a bridge. So here we have the max over 1, and it's pointing away from your load because it grabs this way and releases this way.